Go back to the last one. New media, old media. Man is fear dom ben seo live imagine. Is lucht féic fear difriúil atá go man youth ná mar a bhíon é nuair bhíos ag an comórtas tadorta náisiúnta haula rathaniska. Those of you who benefited from the 14 years of the Irish educational system will no doubt know what I've just said, just for your benefit, Alan, and I'm not in any way trying to suggest that the activities of your Prime Minister and College in any way reduces our perception of the educational system across the water. I simply said, quite simply, I was down the ploughing yesterday, fair crowd down there. 250,000 people wandering down a field looking for ways to spend their money. We're going to hold this down there next year. We're going to be in Tullamore again. I think Karen can offer you a good price on a fair old shed we have down there. You fit a good 200 people into it. So I want to just talk to you about print and newspapers. It's quite an interesting topic. Newspapers in 2025, as I like to interpret this topic, will I still have a job in 10 years, which is a different way of looking at it. That was me 10 months ago, before I became editor. This is me now. As you can see, this is quite a dramatic difference between the two. The rumours, I came in at a very difficult time. I mean, effectively, there were rumours of the demise of newspapers. I was being described at one stage as potentially the last editor of the largest selling newspaper in the country. So enormous weight upon the shoulder. But I mean, it's nothing new. That's The Economist 10 years ago, predicting the decline and demise. They subsequently, but 5 years later, accepted that maybe what they had suggested, that the newspapers were dead or dying, was perhaps a little bit premature. But you did have Philip Meyer's book back at that time. The Vanishing Newspaper, he was saying the first quarter of 2043 would be the last newspaper in the United States. Alan's research gives us an extra 2 years here in Ireland, and did I say that? Thereafter, I'm not too sure. But I mean, the newspaper industry has just gone through an experiential crisis in terms of the changes to the funding model and the audience, but also an existential crisis in terms of what exactly is our role into the future. So if anything, we got caught out by the growth of the internet. In fact, we kind of fed that by giving away all our content for free, allowing other platforms to set up in terms of taking advertising revenue away. In this country, you add in an economic downturn, and you in effect had a perfect storm. But I would argue that it hasn't all been good. I mean, those removals of barriers to entry, whereby you needed substantial setup costs in the past. It kind of did across what I would regard as new media, perhaps result in a decline in what you regard as the core principles in terms of content and journalism. And that could be a blogger, it could be social media, it could be a pure play website. That principles such as fact-checking, avoiding bias, being thorough, no longer appear to be the primary concerns. In some cases they weren't really concerns at all. And newspapers, I think, became so busy fighting for their own survival that they actually forgot for a while that they are the best at what they do, and we're quite capable of taking on the new entrants into the market and beating them at their own game as well as continuing with our own. And I think that fight back has actually begun. We're now seeing that traditional brands have got over the ostrich mentality to the internet, and we're now taking on the pure plays through breaking news, through blogging and through video, as well as offering the traditional style platforms. Ironically, long-form journalism is actually seeing a resurgence at the moment, both started out probably in the United States, with massive investment by the New York Times and the Washington Post, and has come back here to Ireland. People are more likely now to want to read a lengthy piece in a physical newspaper than actually go through the quick, sharp shot online. I think those virtues of trust, experience, verification, context and expertise have also returned to the fore once more. Just when breaking news happens, the old brands are actually finding that they are thriving because people do actually trust what they have to say. And you're in an era where your reputation can be lost within seconds. Just look at David Cameron this week, and for some proof about that. And you see that what people do want are actually brands that they can trust and that they can have confidence in to interpret and to report the news as it is happening. So, in effect, my argument is we don't actually have an audience problem in this country in the newspaper and media industry. We actually just have a funding problem, and I'll come along to that, because we're actually still a nation of readers. If you look at the recent JNRS, you're still seeing 3 million adults in Ireland reading their news, print, online, mobile, desktop or tablet. So, you know, it was breaking it down in terms of no longer looking at just purely in terms of who is physically reading newspapers, who is actually consuming the brands is the thing. 4 out of 5 adults reading newspapers regularly. Daily print readers spending 40 minutes a day reading. On a Sunday was up to 56 minutes. You were actually strangely seeing at the same time as online daily readership, online was increasing by 27% year on year. The print readership was actually remaining quite constant. So the audience was there. They were just moving around in different manners. And you still had 7 out of 10 online readers actually also reading a print title. So people consuming constantly, but just in different formats and probably different times of the day and different times of the week in terms of whatever matches their lifestyle. So we're seeing that, you know, the world is pretty much saturated with content at the moment, but you have to offer readers that choice. So that's access to breaking news and story updates right across the day, and especially when there is a big story actually breaking, but also that ability to delve deeper and offer more insightful analysis and comment and interpretation of what's actually happening. And I think that this actually provides a good backdrop in terms of the marketing world. And here's my point. You know, by their very nature, newspapers deliver more attentive and engaged readers. They're actually physically buying the print product. You're getting a more discerning reader who is going out and buying buying the paper for €2 and making sure that they get some value for money from that product, as opposed to somebody who is just clicking on, clicking off and coming away. Marketeers are actually responding to these merits. One would have to argue. I'm looking at Martin Sorrell's speech at the Cannes Lions this year. Alan was probably there picking up one of his awards, and you know, off to the side, there was other things happening where Martin Sorrell, you know, for a guy that influential, and ironically he was somebody in the marketing world, not in the newspaper world, who was playing up the role of newspapers was quite significant in its own right. There's probably a message there for newspapers that we need to do our own talking as well. And he spoke about that pendulum now beginning to shift back, where he said engagement on traditional news we know is very strong, but it's not measured properly. I think there's a legitimate argument as to whether time spent by consumers is the right metric or whether it should be engagement. And there's some really strong evidence that engagement with traditional media is greater than that of engagement with so-called new media. I think actually we're starting to see with traditional media, particularly newspapers, a little bit of the pendulum swinging back, because people will realise they're more powerful than people will give them credit for. So I'd have to beg the question, when did the public opinion shift on the plight of refugees on this continent? Was it when a story emerged online about what happened, the tragedy for a Syrian Kurdish family who most of the members of which were drowned when they were trying to cross to Europe? Or was it the following morning when this happened? On pretty much every newspaper right across Europe, images like that appearing, and people suddenly waking up to the fact that we had a crisis right upon our doorstep. There was, you know, that was all over print, online, radio and TV the previous day, and yet it took the following morning for people to really see it physically and as brashly and boldly as that, pretty much in almost every newspaper across Europe, for people to go, yeah, you know what, there is a major problem here, and governments are going to have to wake up to it. I think with that great power comes great responsibility, and I would argue that the traditional news brands have greater respect for that responsibility, because, you know, we have the experience of having it over a longer time. From a marketing perspective, then, I think it's going to be more vital than ever that you don't just separate out print and online. They're the same platforms, and any media business like our own is also adapting in that regard in terms of presenting packages to marketeers and advertisers that offer packages right across both. That we're not segmenting, and I don't think the market as a whole has, because the consumer really isn't. They're no longer really saying, oh yes, I only read that online. They're also reading it in print. In some cases, you're having crossed over some media companies with radio and TV as well. Can I just talk to you about just the future? Because here's where I see things not actually changing. I think the ethical fundamentals of journalism have not actually changed. It's still about reporting the best stories in the best way, human stories about real people, and getting that across to the reader in the most distilled and accessible format that they can understand. Trust is still our greatest currency. In old media, new media, whatever form of media you are, if you have the trust and engagement of your reader, you will retain them, and they will value that. So that goal still has to be about dynamic storytelling, authoritative analysis, entertainment and humour. The phrase I used to use constantly to reporters inside in my newspaper is, we have to offer the readers some insight. Tell them something they don't know already, tell them something that broadens their mind, tell them some new facts that offers them a greater insight into the events that are happening before them. Modern day journalism is also going to be adapting to those current trends. It's what we're calling the mojo. It's the mobile journalist who is multi-purpose, multi-platform, multi-skilled. I'll show that one up for a reason, that rather blurry photo up top there of the Taoiseach. That was a rather cathartic moment inside in our building about 2 years ago, before newspapers were printing photos that appeared online. But, probably before we were using Facebook and Twitter a lot more. Everybody didn't have a mobile camera phone. I was out in San Francisco with himself. We had a motorcycle escort everywhere we went, which was quite handy, because in Los Angeles we got stuck in the LA traffic and we missed each other along the way. So by the time we got to San Francisco, we had this escort. The Golden Gate was in the background there. That was taken on an iPad, so it didn't quite come out as well as it should. The Taoiseach was coming down from a viewing point. He met and went along and shook hands with each of the guys here. The motorcycle captain behind him got off his bike and said, "Mr. Kenny, you want to get in the bike?" And I saw the tie twitching. Jesus, he was like John Wayne about to jump on a horse in Red River. And then he turned and he saw me. And, not since Clint Eastwood and Dirty Harry has there been somebody who was so well armed. I had an iPad in one hand, a digital camera around my neck, and an iPhone there. And he took one look at me and I said, "That guy isn't going to let me get away with that." So, I spoiled the Taoiseach's day there. But that was sent by me back on an iPad, back to Dublin from an 8-hour time difference. It was up online within minutes, and it was in the paper the following morning. I wasn't in the early editions. It got in about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. We got it out. And it was used as kind of an example of, this is the way that we're going, that the old style journalist, 5-10 years earlier, you would have had to have a journalist who was there on site recording events, and you would have had to have a photographer there with him as well, 2,000 to 3,000 miles away, and the photo would have been sent back the following day. Times had changed, and that was kind of cited as an example of how times had changed within our own business, and that mix of new and old media coming together and operating together. Unfortunately, great journalism just isn't going to be enough. We're going to have to move towards a more interactive experience and also monetize it. And these plans are going to have to involve print, online, digital, all integrated right across media organizations. Just that delineation between I'm writing for print, I'm writing for digital, I'm writing for online, it isn't going to matter. You're just producing the content, and the organisation decides what platform it goes up upon. It's going to be about making bold editorial and commercial decisions and not being afraid to fail. Try again, adapt again, try it again, fail again, work it again, succeed again. You're going to have to turn newspapers into media businesses that think and adapt like a tech company. So I can't tell you here today if there is going to be a physical newspaper in 10 years' time. Maybe there isn't going to be. Maybe it's going to be on that rolled up roll that Alan was talking about earlier on. That's what people will have in their back pocket. People will subscribe to the platform. It'll be uploaded for them. It maybe the front page, even though they're technically buying the physical newspaper, will adapt over the course of the day. Maybe there will be multiple layers to that rolled up paper. But I think the one thing that is going to happen, there's going to be newspapers here in one form or another, because we have to view those ideas and passion and vision and integrity as real weapons in the mobile war. It's just about taking on the internet and beating it at its actual own game. By doing that, you're going to have to invest and develop new talent. It's no longer about waiting for some magic formula to come along whereby the world owes us some sort of revenue, it owes us an income. We're just going to have to get along with the game, because I think for too long everybody has been looking around to see, well, what exactly is the model that's going to work the best. There's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for every media organisation there. So as I say, not an audience problem. The audience are there. It's really just a funding problem. So I think the newspaper of 2025, it's going to be interactive, it's going to be local, it's going to be niche, it's going to be specialist, it's going to be expert, it's going to be campaigning. It's not just going to be a catch-all. I think newspapers are going to have to express a view more firmly. They're going to have to come down on one side of the fence or another. It's going to be about being worthy of the confidence that is instilled in you by your reader, that they trust you to make a judgment call upon an issue. As I say, just offering insights all of the time. I'd question, though, if there's going to be the same number of titles within the Irish market. I think some of the indigenous Irish titles are struggling to a point where in the next couple of years it's going to be quite crucial to see if some of them have survived. Also, in terms of some of those who came from abroad, I edited a newspaper, was launched in 1905. We merged in the 1920s with a paper that dates back to 1763. During the famine period, it was spoken of as something that priests would read out to their illiterate flock to engage with them and inform them of what was happening in the world. There's a purpose to that history lesson. It's not to bore you. It's actually to say there is a point here. You've got to compare the heritage of the newspaper that I worked for compared to others who came in during the Celtic Tiger days, who came in because they believed that there was a book to be made here, who don't have that same level of engagement with the Irish market. I think a number of the traditional newspapers in this country, not just have a stake in this country, but they've actually helped to shape it. I question whether others have the same view of it, or is it literally just a bottom line in London to add on an extra couple of copies in terms of circulation. I think as the crunch comes in the coming years, that tradition and that heritage that the Irish titles have is going to play quite strongly, and I don't think some of the other players who've entered the market are going to stick it out, just because they just don't have that association with the market here. I think as well in the future, newspapers are going to have to be more accessible, more interactive, more personalised, more responsive to the readers. We have something that's called letters to the editor, which I read every day. That now translates into Facebook and Twitter, constantly seeing what exactly is it that your readers are looking for. What are their views? Why should you not respond to each and every one of them who are coming back towards you? But that notion of integrity and trust, I just think that is going to become ever more vital as you get such a proliferation of brands right across the board, offering various different types of content. I think as well that brand journalism isn't just going to be about the newspaper itself, but also about the individual journalists with whom there is going to be a connection with the individual readers. So, the role that is quite valuable is actually going to remain the same. It's going to be about creating accountability, promoting transparency, keeping government entities and myriad businesses in check, exposing corruption. I think over the last 10 years, if anything, we have seen that we still need strong newspapers, strong media titles to scrutinise and observe what is going on within the corridors of power. And I think there's an interest for everybody, if they wanted to see the country, your country survive and to prosper, that those principles remain in place. I'm tempted to say, I'll give you a few numbers: 2, 11, 22, 23, 29 and 40. If you think I can predict what's happening in 10 years' time, then try them in the lotto on Saturday night and see how you get on. But Arthur Miller said over 50 years ago, a good newspaper, I suppose, is a nation talking to itself. I think that newspapers, the good newspapers that are an intrinsic part of this nation, they will continue to have that valued voice, and I think that they will continue to offer a very valuable platform to marketeers. Thank you.